Okay, yesterday we started learning the dinim of what's called B'sir Tzapas. We got sidetracked a little bit. Okay, so when you have food that you have to make a meitzi, so you have to wash for bread. And we learned if you eat 2 ounces, you make a bracha until Sidayim. If you eat less than a kabeh, it's less than 2 ounces, you don't make a bracha until Sidayim. Now you're not allowed to make a separation between the washing for bread and making the hameitzi. It's not only is it forbidden to talk, it's forbidden that it should take a bunch of time. In fact, it says the amount of time it takes to walk Chav Bais Amma, which is 44 feet, which is not a lot. In other words, ideally, you're supposed to wash and make a meitzi right away. Unless if it's a Shabbos meal, you have a lot of people. A lot of people, so then you have no choice, but they're all waiting. But you're not allowed to talk. If somebody talks, things not pertaining to the meal. So let's say they wash and they want to make a meitzi and they realize there's no salt and they say, bring salt or bring a knife or something like that. Then they do not have to remake the wash again because they spoke about things pertaining to the meal. But if somebody talks about something totally irrelevant to the meal, they ask how's the weather or whatever, so then you have to wash again without a bracha.
Is there a certain amount of time that they would have to, if they wait that long?
If they wait, no. B'lechatchila, it says you should wait less than 22 amas, but b'diavad, as long as you weren't mafsik, you didn't talk, it's okay even if it takes longer. And many times you have a table full of people, everybody washes, it takes more time than that.
You gotta ask for the salt? You gotta ask for the salt b'lechatchila, it's only if it's b'diavad?
No, b'diavad, you should try, it's a,
So we wait in the kitchen, 44 hours.
It's better not to ask, talk. If that's the only way you're going to get it, then you can get it. What? Okay, next. But what happens if you're washed already for bread, you didn't make a meitzi yet, but you hear a bracha? I'll give you a simple example. Somebody else washed. Okay, and then they make the bracha until Shidayim loud. Or they already made a meitzi, and they make a meitzi out loud. So the din is allowed to answer amen in all brachas. The kids hold on all brachas. Some poskim say at least until Yadayim and Ameitzi. But the more or less the halacha is you can answer amen in all brachas. Again, if it's a very practical case, you wash the bread and then you already made the bracha and you're walking to your seat and you hear somebody washing making the bracha until Yadayim, so you answer amen. What?
Let's say they give bracha between Hamotzi and eating, you can't talk.
No, between Ameitzi and eating, you're not allowed to talk at all. For no reason. You have to take a little bite. What?
Even if someone else say amen, someone else will talk.
No, you don't. Not until you take a little bit of a bite. Now, this doesn't apply, well, this would apply on Shabbos. Years ago, they didn't have sliced bread like we have today. They used to have a roll and you would cut it. So, which part of the bread do you make a bracha on? So, according to halacha, the best part of the bread is the bread that's the hardest, which is the crust, because that shows it's baked the best. So l'chatchila, when you make a meitzi, you're supposed to make a bracha on the crust of the bread. So let's say even if you're taking, let's say you have a slice of rye bread, yeah, and you're making a meitzi, you shouldn't take a meitzi from the middle. I mean, if you did, but the it is good. But l'chatchila, where do you make a meitzi on? On the piece where the crust is, because that's the best part of the bread. It's still considered the best part of the bread. If you're not going to eat it, then you don't have to then you don't have to.
Why do you cut it?
We'll get that in a second. What?
Tell us the story about the Tanah and Menashe HaMelech.
The one?
The Tanah and the Menashe HaMelech, about what the halacha you just said.
No.
That he dragged. Let's study about King Menashe and become who is green.
It was nothing about bread.
Asking about the halacha.
It was Rav Ashi, and he just say with the derogatory about Menashe. Anyway, okay. Now, according to halacha, during the week, again, today we have sliced bread, so it's a different story. So let's say this is the piece of bread, okay? Let's say you have a whole loaf of bread or a big roll of bread. So there's two things. it's preferable to make a bracha on something which is complete rather than broken. Yet there's also a concept of not making a separation between the bracha and the eating. So during the week, the preferable thing to do if you're slicing bread, it says in halacha, when you start making the bracha, you start cutting the bread. Let's say you have a knife and you're saying, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hameitzi lechem min haaretz, that when you finish the bracha, you finish slicing it, and then you break off a piece of bread, and then that's what you eat. You dip it into salt, like we'll soon learn, and that's what you eat.
So if you're eating a sandwich, you have to do the salt and wait.
Well, you're supposed to still take a little piece off, make a bracha, and put it into salt. In Bachal, there's another interesting halacha that nobody keeps today, and I guess today, because it became acceptable, there's etiquette halacha etiquette of a meal. Now, when you bite into something big, it's very unethical. It's not menschlichkeit. You look like a chazer, Loshen is raftan. You look like a guy that you didn't eat for 10 years. Like when you see a kiddush, people charge the food that they didn't eat for 10 years. So halachically, a glutton's more drinking though. So let's say you have, you see this sometimes, you have a big, those big cheeseburgers or a kosher cheeseburger, let's say, okay? What? Yeah, whatever. So according to halacha, you're not allowed to make a meitzim bite into it. Because you look like a chazer, really. Like, you look very disgusting. So even technically a sandwich, let's say you have a tuna sandwich, or a cold deli sandwich with 2 pieces of bread, and whatever the stuff's in the middle, really you shouldn't bite into it like that. People do today, and therefore it's the contemporary posture, right, this is accepted, it doesn't look like a fresser anymore because this is the way people do it. But what normally people should do properly, if you have a sandwich, you should cut it in half. Because when you bite into half, it's not, So the proper thing is, you start making a bracha when the piece is still complete, and then when you finish the bracha, it's the time you finish cutting it, and there's a concept in halacha called bitzias hapas. Even lahavdil, the goyim have an expression, we went to break bread. Bitzias hapas means breaking bread. It's the English translation of bitzias hapas. Because in halacha, when you cut it with a knife, the end you're supposed to break off a piece. And that's what you're what you're eating. So, what?
You hold the 2 breads. How are you going to hold 2 breads and hold the knife and say the bracha at the same time?
When you're talking Shabbos.
Yeah.
No, Shabbos is a different story. Shabbos, you just make a mark. Okay? Why? In Hebrew they say, savlonut, patience. And Shabbos, you have a different issue. I said, that's why I was mentioning this, you do during the week. On Shabbos, you have the 2 challahs together. Okay? So obviously, so what you do is, you take the knife, and before you make a meitzi, you make a mark on the challah you're cutting. You don't cut into it, you just make a mark. As if to show where you're going to be cutting. Then you make the bracha, okay, with 2 hands on the 2 challahs, and then you cut. Shabbos is the reason because you need shlein after it has to be complete. You need lechem mishnah and complete ones. So Shabbos is a whole different din about that. What?
On Shabbos, do you have to use a knife, or do you just start putting a piece of challah?
The proper, appropriate way in halacha is to use a knife, unless if it's a small roll.
No, well, we never use it, like in Asia.
Okay. I understand, but again, if it's in Shabbos, there's an inyan of making a mark first. So if you have a long nail, you can make a mark with your nail.
That's to know where you're cutting, right?
That is to show that I began cutting already. Not to know where you're cutting. I mean, what's the difference? It's to show, because during the week, you have to start cutting it when you make the bracha. Here you can't do it because you need complete chalos. So you make a mark as if to say, I'm starting to cut, and then you cut it right away. What?
Is it an idea that there's 10 words in Halacha, and with that 10 fingers you have to hold your hand to
Well, we didn't get to that yet. That's coming up in two sifim. That when you make a bracha meitzi, you're supposed to hold the bread with both hands with all 10 fingers.
So if you're cutting, you're not doing all 10 words of the bracha while you're holding it.
You could still, even when you're cutting, you're still holding it a little bit. Because, try it. You can still hold it. But it says in halacha, here, kaidem shevar, before you make the bracha. Before you make the bracha, you have to hold it in your 10 pieces of bread. If you're breaking it, you do it even then. But if you're cutting it, as long as before, it says in halacha, before you make the bracha, you do it. Why? Because there's 10 mitzvahs in the Torah from the time, by the time you get the piece of bread. For instance, it says, you can't plow with an ox and a donkey together. You're not allowed to plant mixed seeds. You have leket, shich, and peh, the 3 things you give for the poor people. You're not allowed to muzzle the ox when it's working. Truma, ma'aser rishon, ma'aser sheni, and challah. Therefore, because there's 10 mitzvahs connected to bread, so it says there's 10 words in the bracha hameitzi. There's 10 words in the pasuk Peseches Yedechem Espilachol Chayratzin. So all these psukim, it says V'yitan L'cha Amitari Ein Yechol Elachi Yisabeiro Eretz Chito Seira V'yitan L'cha. In fact, there's various different. So when you count a minyan, many people use V'yitan L'cha Elokim Yital L'Shemaim. Some say Yeshia Samecha. So different people do different things. But these are all the concepts of 10 because those are the 10 mitzvahs connected to it. What?
You mentioned it a few months ago. Which bread do you use on which side? On Shabbos or Shabbos?
Friday night, the bottom challah is closer to you. Shabbos day, they're next to each other. Oh, we'll get there. Okay.